Na 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 na, na 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 na, hey hey hey, goodbye. What is up, everybody, and welcome to my review of Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom, the final chapter, the swan song, if you will, for the DC Extended Universe. So for those that might not be as in the know of what goes on with comic book films, the DC Extended Universe started 10 years ago with Man of Steel, carried through with movies like Batman v Superman, the two different versions of Justice League, the Wonder Woman movies, the different Suicide Squad movies, Shazam, and of course Aquaman. And that has come to a close. Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom, final film in that continuity, rounding out a 10-year run before in 2025 we get Superman Legacy that's going to be written and directed by James Gunn, and that's going to kick off a brand new attempted cinematic universe of the DC characters that's actually going to be ran by James Gunn. And you know, that brings a lot of complicated feelings. I am somebody who does love Man of Steel, so I really enjoyed how this universe kicked off. I am a Zack Snyder fan. I'm not a fanatic. I'm not a part of the Release the Snyder Cut cult crowd by any means, but I do enjoy his movies. I do wish we could have seen his version of this universe come to fruition, but nonetheless, there's just been 10 years of just chaotic, ridiculous decisions and drama and just absolute botched cinematic universe in about every single way. And so I do think a reboot is desperately needed. But I have been a fan of more of these movies than I have not. And it's actually been an interesting journey because most of the life of my channel has been spent in this DCEU timeline, to where not too long after Batman v Superman, I started this channel. Suicide Squad, I think, was one of the first movies that I started to cover on this channel. And I remember even when I was just kind of figuring out what to do on YouTube, one of the main things that I was covering was the day-to-day changes of Ben Affleck's in as Batman, Ben Affleck's out as Batman. He promises he's going to direct a movie. He just quit the universe completely. It was just this crazy time that I decided to join in on this YouTube journey. And now we're at the end. Now we're at the end with Aquaman: The Lost Kingdom, a movie that was never intended to be the end of this universe. And after you watch it, it's not really an end to this universe. They're just stopping. Now, as far as Aquaman, I actually did enjoy the first movie. I'm actually higher on that movie than most people. For a period of time, that was my second favorite DCEU film. I really don't care for when the DC films lean into the goofier side of things, but there's a certain element of Aquaman that you can't really ignore that's inherently silly, and I felt the first one did a good job of having kind of this epic, mythic, like Shakespearean edge to Aquaman and a king that's going to claim his kingdom, while also having a little bit of tongue-in-cheek fun with the goofiness of this world. So overall, that was a DC movie that I really enjoyed. So prior to all of the massive reshoots and the announced reboot and basically every DC film this year feeling like this leftover stuff that they're just letting come out with no enthusiasm whatsoever, previous to that, I would have been excited for this movie. As it stands, I really just didn't care. I saw this just kind of because I have a channel and I'm expected to cover it. If I wasn't on YouTube, I probably would have waited and saw this on VOD. But that's what happens when you announce a rebooted universe before you close out your current universe. Weird decisions. But was the movie any good? You know, it's not intended to be the end of this universe. I didn't walk in with the expectations that I'm going to get some kind of an epic team-up closeout or a bookended chapter in any way, but as an Aquaman sequel, is it any good? But really quick before we dive into the good, bad, and ugly of Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom, if you're getting overwhelmed with the demands of the holiday season and one of the first casualties is eating healthy, then check out the sponsor of today's video, Factor. Raise your hand if the holiday season is one of the busiest and most stressful times of the year for you. Work tends to pick up, the kids are going to be at home, there's tons of prep that has to be done in regards to buying presents, wrapping presents, cooking holiday meals, planning travel. Oh look, it's not just me. Well, with all those things going on in the holiday season, one of the first casualties is always eating well, and that's where Factor meals have come in to help. With Factor meals, you're able to skip the trip to the grocery store, the prepping, the cutting, the cleanup, and enjoy fresh, never frozen meals that are ready in just 2 minutes. So all you have to do is heat, enjoy, and then get back to wrapping those presents. There's even calorie smart meals with around or less than 550 calories. And with over 34 chef prepared and dietitian approved meals, there's a variety of weekly options that will never allow you to fall victim to food fatigue. Plus, you can round out your meal and replenish your snack supply with over 45 different add-ons, such as apple cinnamon pancakes or fruit smoothies. So if you're looking to take the hassle out of healthy eating, head to factor75.com or click the link below and use code CodyLeach50 to get 50% off of your first Factor box. That's 50% off by using the code CodyLeach50 at the link in the video description or by going to factor75.com. And thank you so much to Factor for partnering with me on today's sponsorship. Well, starting off with the positives, my favorite thing about this movie, and really the only thing that it does that I would say is obviously better than the first film, is the relationship that is built and developed between Aquaman and Ocean Master, between Jason Momoa and Patrick Wilson. So they were antagonists in the first film. Orm, the Ocean Master, was the main antagonist of that film, and it was all about Aquaman kind of rising to his potential and coming to reclaim his kingdom from Orm before he takes battle to the upper world to land. And this film is about him having to team back up with his sworn enemy, his brother who hates him, to take down a much more sinister villain. And you know, that's an element that we've seen done before. It's an interesting way to kind of show different sides of your hero and the enemy and kind of color out the relationship more. And I think they did a pretty good job with it here. And I think that Jason Momoa and Patrick Wilson have really good chemistry with each other. If the universe was not ending, I would look forward to seeing more with those two characters, because I think that they work well with each other. I think that their personalities complement each other very much, to where Jason Momoa, very carefree surfer bro, like, yeah, I'm the king, but I don't really know what the fuck I'm doing. Let's go have a beer. And you have Orm, who is very much straight-laced, was raised in royalty, is proper, and understands all of the politics and the nuances of what's going on, and wants to do what is best for Atlantis, whether it's the best for him or not. And those two very different personalities were fun to see with each other, see how they kind of go through different struggles and how they both have their own different ways about getting through certain obstacles, and how one can be right one moment, one can be right the other moment, and some decent moments for humor there, although we'll talk more about the humor in the negative side of this video. I liked what they brought. That's the main thing about this sequel that I really enjoyed, was those two characters together.
Ooh, you look rough.
And as far as character arcs go, I did like what we explored with the character of Ocean Master. You know, Aquaman doesn't necessarily have a big character arc. We'll talk about that a little later. But Orm, as somebody who is jaded, somebody who has had his kingdom stripped from him, he's been thrown in this prison and he's just wasting away in this prison. And then suddenly now he has to work with his enemy and realize kind of the goodness of his enemy and some of his own faults. And you know, every bit of satisfaction that you're going to get from a character development, you're going to get from Orm, and I think they did a good job here. Again, if they were going to explore these characters further, I think they did a nice job here as a second chapter of building these characters up and setting up some interesting places to go. Visually, this is a very fun world to spend time in. You know, you have Atlantis, the underwater effects, and the CGI I think was very good. I did not see this in 3D. I've heard some people say the CGI is wonky, but they all say they saw it in a 3D screening. In the 2D format, I thought it looked good. A lot of really vivid colors. There's a lot more exploration of different areas of the underwater world here, and a lot more sea creatures. They dive way more into that than they did in the first film, which was mostly focused on just the Atlanteans and the human sea dwellers. And so just on a visual front, I think the movie was fun to look at, and it kept my eyes interested with what was going on throughout the entire film. There's a nice variety and mix of action here, to where you get practical stunt work and fight scenes that are on land that are very obviously stunt doubles and choreography and wire work and things like that at play, but you also get the very digital effects heavy underwater sequences. You have variations of sea creatures going at it. You have some that are like just giant crustaceans and just bigger, hulkier versions of actual sea life. You have others that lean a little bit more into the mythic horror kind of characters that James Wan very much brings his style to. So on an action front, there's a nice variety here. Really, overall, what I would say is that if you're a fan of the first Aquaman movie, I think more people than not will at least enjoy this film. I'm not going to say everybody, because I do think that the first film is a bit better than this one, but if what they were going for in the first film worked for you, if you want to see more of that, that's what this sequel does. It just it dives more into that world, dives more into those characters, explores the world of Atlantis a little bit more, and I would say tries to have a little bit more fun with it than the first time, which is going to be the spot that divides everybody. And with that being said, we'll kick off the mixed, and that is something that I'm very much kind of on the fence about. This movie is much sillier and has a lot more of a tongue-in-cheek approach than the first film did, and I think that's going to be the main thing that divides everybody, because that's the main thing that I'm struggling with on whether or not I overall liked this movie or was a bit disappointed in it. Because while I think there's an element of this world you have to have a tongue-in-cheek acknowledgement of, as I said, they did pretty well in the first film, you know, with the octopus doing the drums and shit like that. This movie leans much further into that side of things. There's a lot more goofiness, there's a lot more silliness, there's a lot more of a laid-back approach to the storytelling here. And while that looser, more fun element might be something that some people enjoy more, I found myself wanting them to take themselves seriously a little bit more throughout the runtime. So while I enjoy the fact that they can have fun with this and they can acknowledge it for what it is and not be afraid to acknowledge it, I felt they acknowledged it just a bit too much here, and that's going to depend entirely on your taste, whether it's too much or too little. And one of the main components of that is Jason Momoa himself and his performance as Aquaman in this second film. Now, I am a Momoa fan. I do like what he brings to this take of Aquaman. I thought that he was the best part by a landslide of Fast X, where he was very much leaning into just having fun and chewing up the scenery. And here, I felt like he almost leaned a little bit too far into his laid-back metalhead surfer bro personality that we all love him for. But the attempted drama, the attempted stakes this movie goes for never landed, because it never felt like Aquaman was taking it all that seriously. There was so many moments where he was just joking around, especially when he's paired up against Patrick Wilson, who's very much taking things seriously, and he's just waxing away about how good burgers and pizza and beer are, and it's just like, this is fun. This is what I like about Jason Momoa, but I just don't know if we need this much of it in this movie, because it just undercuts everything outside of the silliness that you're going for. And now moving on to the negatives. The main one for me is the humor. I didn't like the humor in this movie. Now, there's moments that it was fine, but there was significantly more where it just fell flat. This is, yet again, DC trying to manufacture that MCU style humor. And again, I don't mean to keep comparing universes, but it's the most obvious comparison to make. Ever since they axed the whole Zack Snyder approach, we've seen more and more elements of this show up in DC films, sometimes for better, sometimes for worse. And in this one, it was so on the nose of just, let's have this low-hanging fruit dad joke style humor that it just doesn't work for me. I don't think that it's funny. I don't even think that it's funny in the MCU anymore. So when they try to bring it over here and it's so mile a minute with it and most of the jokes are just falling flat for me, it starts to grate on my nerves. I mean, there's times where it's like, how did you think that anybody above 4 years old was going to laugh at that? Like, do you think it's funny to have somebody piss in Aquaman's mouth? Check yes or no. If you checked yes, you're in luck, because there's 3 different times that happens. The main villain of this movie, Black Manta, I enjoyed him in the first film. I was looking forward to seeing that character get upgraded and kind of promoted to main villain and seeing them flesh that antagonistic relationship out and that vengeance out a little bit more. They do it in like the least interesting possible way here, to where he's just this stock angry guy who wants revenge. The whole plot of the movie essentially is that you have Black Manta that has this evil trident, and now he is going to all of these secret vaults and getting this green ooze that he can release greenhouse gases into the air above water and kind of extrapolate global warming. And every once in a while, oh yeah, I'm really pissed at Aquaman, by the way. And so that's basically your 2 motivations of the villain. I didn't find it to be worthy of that character or worthy of what Yahya Abdul-Mateen can bring to a character like that. So the villain fell flat on its face for me in this one. And while I did not walk into this movie expecting this, It frustrates me that this is the end of the DCEU because there's just no acknowledgement of that whatsoever. There's no bit of satisfaction by the end of this that feels like, okay, there's closure here. And for as many reshoots and as many things that they did in the editing room with not only The Flash, but also this movie's gone through like 5 or 6 different versions. There's people that I've heard that saw a completed version of this film over a year ago that is wildly different than what we are all seeing this weekend. The fact that they didn't just put a few $1,000s into doing something to cap off this universe with some sort of acknowledgement or respect for the fans or a thank you or something, it frustrates me. I don't know how they would have done it. I don't know if it would have felt shoehorned in, but this movie ends and it's like, well, I guess that's it. And for the end of this 10-year journey that we have all been on, and some of us have been fans of for most of the time, it just feels like yet another element of this reboot rollout that just feels bafflingly dumb. To the point where the actual ending of this movie, the cap off to this universe, if you will, it feels like a very goofy, tongue-in-cheek reverse of how the MCU kicked off. And if you've seen the movie, you know exactly what I'm talking about, but I'm being so vague that if you haven't seen it, you don't know what the hell I'm describing. But the note the movie ends on, the final line by Aquaman, is so blatantly like a joke in reference to the MCU that to me, it was embarrassing. I was like, that's not funny, and that's not clever, and that really feels pathetic that you did that. So it just left me in a note where I'm like, oh God, you couldn't even stick the landing in a boring way. You had to go out with that pathetic shit. Overall, guys, like, did I like the movie? It was fine. Like, it did enough to entertain me that it's going to teeter over the edge of me saying that I can recommend it to DC fans and to Aquaman fans only. This is not a movie that's going to change your mind if you didn't like the first Aquaman. This is not a movie that's going to change your mind if you didn't like the DCEU. It doesn't do anything to merit its existence beyond just being another one of these leftover movies. So you know who you are in that equation. If you want to see it, if you're looking forward to it, you'll probably have a decent enough time with it. If you didn't, don't. Well, that's it for this one, guys. If you enjoyed that, please click over here for all of my 2023 new release reviews. I'm also going to put my most recent DCEU ranking before I update that here over the next week. Like, share, hit the subscribe button so you don't miss that. And as always, remember, opinions are like assholes, but that doesn't mean you have to be.